Hello. Okay, my talk today is about applying event sourcing, CQRS together on the Rails project. I will start like kind of the run trip, showing you like how looks like each piece of this. So, who I am the CTO of the Berlin-based fintech startup. Right now, I am on departure to the Zen Cargo. I am interested in the domain-driven design, event sourcing, CQRS, functional programming, many languages, many technologies over the many years. I have a Twitter account and I am using it. Okay, so this is agenda for today. All the topics which I would like to mention. I will not go too much in the details because there is lots of them, but I will show you like real examples of the code and how we are dealing with it and how you can use it. First of all, I would like to mention again about event storming, which was mentioned yesterday. And to be honest, I believe this is like most important part of doing domain-driven design in your company. You can try to make domain design in your company, but without really cooperation from the business side, this will not work at all. The best way to make it working is like invite business people to like cooperate with you directly, and in order to make it, you need to have some tools which they can use it. If you will use UML and show them, they will not really enjoy using it. And then like there are two different levels of understanding. We are talking our technical jargon. They have own domain language. They understand each other. So the idea behind of the event storming is that you're taking very simple tools, sticky notes with different colors. You're taking pen, huge space, probably wall with like sheet of the paper, and then everybody have own pen, everybody have own stickers. Each stickers have different meaning. The most important one is the event sticker here, and then how you starting the whole workshop together with the business people. So you're starting first by explaining them that what is the purpose of this meeting. You're showing them, okay, we have here timeline, and we're choosing one domain expert to give us one example event which happened in the business process. We're not talking about like all technical details. We are asking them about the business process event which happened. Once they make it, we are able to ask questions. What happened before? What happened after or in the same time with it? We are collecting one by one all of these events sticky notes. There is more and more of them. We are doing this in the parallel. Everybody have own sticky notes, so we can non-interrupt each other. They can put lots of them, and then even if there are some questions about like open topics, you can use different colors for questions and notes. You will write it down and leave it later for discussion without breaking the flow of thinking of other people, which are like preparing themselves to express the domain with sticky notes. So when you have lots of different sticky notes for the events, you like have chance slowly to identify your main subject in the around of the tickets. When you have it, you can start thinking more about like move the cards, think about it, what will be the order, what will be the relation between one event and another one. And then by putting more questions, you can dive deeper about understanding of each event, of each conditions which are inside of your business process. Then you're adding more and more. You have different sticky colors for external services. You can different colors for even expressing UI if you need it. So there is no limit here. And color also are like, you can choose any, only if you all agree on the same colors and on the same meaning of it. So this is, for example, like how looks like result of the simple session when you added multiple sticky notes, asked lots of different questions and put them on the wall. The truth is that you cannot make all of it in one step. Making event storming is like iteration like you need to make multiple iteration to make it happen. This is like revealing the understanding of the domain, and you're making like multiple iterations, multiple steps in order to go to the state. And what is really important is like was mentioned, you cannot like force people to think about it too long, because they will be demotivated and start escaping. Important part of it, which was mentioned already, is that you need to make it without chairs, comfort zone. They all need to like interact, and for you as person who will like try to introduce it, you need to like really observe them. There will be some people who are actively giving you lots of information. They are just throwing away all of the knowledge they have about the business process on the table, but there will be like just people who are like trying to hide them behind of the scenes and like don't interact with it. So you need to respond in different ways for this kind of people. So the result of such event storming can look like that. This was already mentioned yesterday. We are using a real-time board for that. This lets us work in the parallel together. Everybody have open screen, and this is working as well remotely. Of course, you cannot observe how they will react, if they are like unhappy with it or not, but they cannot interrupt each other by just doing own sticky notes in one place and later on move it and then use it correctly. You can also use different colors to show which questions were already answered, and or you can just remove them. But I would say it's better to keep them to see what was the question already asked than just removing them. So event storming is alternative for this one. So I saw so many times tickets which have like multiple pages of the business requirements explaining what are the expectations for your work and what you need to do. But the problem is, like, if I will take this requirement, I will choose randomly 5 different people from this room, then you will have 5 different implementations, because everything is about perception, how you will understand what is written here. And then you will have like 5 different implementations. If you have, let's say, one conventions, how you are doing it, it's, let's say, okay. But if you believe in different frameworks, different libraries, different solutions, approaches, this will be the nightmare. So if you need more information about event storming, again, go back to this book. It's really good. And there's multiple presentations of the Alberto Brandolini about it. So definitely go to YouTube and watch this. About domain-driven design, I will not tell you too much, because there was like mentioned so many times already. There are like at least 4 books about it. The books which was forgotten yesterday is the domain-driven Rails. If you need more information about what really domain-driven design is, it's again, I am asking you to go back to YouTube and just watch past movies from the presentations. About bounded context was also mentioned multiple times. I will tell you my definition of how I understanding bounded context. For me, bounded context is not only encapsulation of the whole logic in separation from other logic, but it's also like the border which telling you that there is one unique meaning of the single things. So for example, if you have application which have customers, B2B and B2C, there are 2 different kinds of customers. They will never land in the same bounded context. So this is the way how you're thinking. You're having only one meaning in the bounded context of each none in your system. So we are using Rails Event Store. I would like to give you some reasoning about it, why I choose this platform. So first of all, like you see it here, there is really good documentation on it, so you can easily start with it. There is actively done and maintenance supported by RKNC people and also other people who are right now maintainers of these gems. The nice thing about cooperation with RKNC is that they give me immediately after making pull request access to just merge my own stuff without like babysit me and like tell me how to do this. They just give me the access, and they give me the access for Slack, and then I was able to start contributing to this project from like day 1 when I have it. So I would like to also talk today about like how to describe the domain. you can, like, lots of the sticky nodes, but the sticky, like, events are not only the things. You have lots of types in your system which are part of the domain. So for this purpose, we are using dry types, dry struct, and dry validations. We are slowly leaving dry validations. The problem with such libraries is that they are strongly opinionated, and very often implementation is directed only in one way, which supporting other frameworks, other libraries. So this is example how domain types can be collected together to just express what is inside of your domain, what are the types, and so on. The nice thing about dry types, like, they behaving kind of like static types by just definition of the constraints. You can define union types and so on, and you can express all of the, let's say, values in your domain by defining them in the dry types. You can define your own constructor, for example, for the money, which will wrap existing type in the dry type, that you can reuse it later in the dry structs, which are representing for us commands and events. So this is like another domain with showing like all the different types and constraints from another application. So this is overview slide, which is showing all of the parts, which I will show you today, to explain like how to use event sourcing. Like, event sourcing is not something simple which you can start doing it day one without understanding. That's why I would like to show you how each piece of the software, and also explain you what we added to libraries which were provided by ArcNC just for our happiness and our requirements which we had it. If you want to, again, dive more about event sourcing, I think that there was like lots of good questions, great answers about that today, but definitely, again, go back, watch presentations from people who really know it. There will be tons of different examples, and there is no single true. They have all of them different opinions about it, and it's difficult really to decide which one is really better, or which we like more or not. So let's start from user interface. We developed something which is command form. It was already mentioned that forms are commands. I would a little bit disagree with that, because commands are something different for me, and forms as well. So we developed the piece of the software which behave from outside like regular active model form object. The nice thing about it, like, you can put any nested dry struct type inside of it, and he will like convert it in the nested active model, which lets you build any complex form by just using fields for it, and then you will have it working for you. Important thing about command form is that you can define multiple commands on the command form. For example, you have one huge form which have lots of different fields, but you would like to have intention revealing from such command form. This means that, for example, if on big form you just enter the new password, the only command responsible for change new password will be triggered, because we are able to detect which fields changed in the command forms from like actual state by input provided by the user. So if there is like 10 or 20 different commands, which can be super atomic, we know exactly which one we should dispatch to our system. There is also the way to define weak fields. Some of them, some fields are like appearing on two different commands, and there are more like references, and then you don't want to trigger command dispatching when the reference just appear. Sorry. So this is example again of command. We are using dry structs to implement our commands, and we are defining here schema type. This means that if you will use this as command input, form input, and you will not provide some information, nothing will happen. We will let you enter the empty value here. For the events, we are filling all informations. We don't want to lose any informations about the fact which happened in our system. That's why events are not schema type, are like strict, which have all of the informations to not mistake that we didn't supply one example field. Okay, so this is example how controller with event sourcing looks like. We have here our command form. We calling update with all of the params which can match particular commands. And then we are providing the context, which can be, for example, email of the user, information about location, information about IP address, and so on. And then we just calling save on command form. Implementation of the save is super simple. There is just checking if validation passed, and then we are dispatching all of the commands which detect the changes inside of the form. Then we have validations. In the previous implementations, we used write validations, and validations were defined on the commands, but we come up with the solution when validations is defined on the command form, because command form belongs to the view. And those validations are not really business logic validations. Those are like data input validations. This is what I showed you before, that you can define multiple nested validations. So if you have one type and another value object, you can nest them how many times you want, and all of the standard validations from active model, active record are available for you. Okay, let's talk about command handlers. This is example of the most of our command handlers. We have here information about what is the aggregate, what is the aggregate ID, and then with aggregate helper taking creation of the command, of aggregate, and rehydrating of it with all the past events, and then returning to us just instance of aggregate on which one we are calling later, like command method. This is example of this helper which I shows you. So first step is just creation of the aggregate class with passing aggregate ID as the first value. Then we are yielding aggregate instance, which is already rehydrated, because build is also creating the stream name and loading all of the past events from the store, and then giving you rehydrated aggregate here. So then you can execute any business method on it. What is aggregate? There are like multiple definitions what is aggregate or aggregate root. From one side, aggregate root, when we're talking about event sourcing, is like the main objects which have constraints to run all your business logic with like transaction borders, and have all of the events serialized in the event store. But from other point of view, like more like domain-driven design, it's like aggregate root is like your public contract for whole the tree of the objects which are connected to each other. For example, if you have invoice model, then you will have multiple positions inside. You will have information about delivery address, about payment of such invoice, and so on. With Raceway, you can just modify all of these things directly, but with aggregate root, you should just use all methods which are public contract. You should never modify objects in the tree directly. You cannot like change objects inside. You cannot add more items to relations or not. So this is example how looks like simple constructor of aggregate. We have two kinds of methods on aggregate. One kind is just command methods, which are taking the commands requests, and another one are callbacks for mutating of the state of aggregates. So this distinction between distinguish between command method and event is here because you don't want to execute again some code which will make side effects when you are rehydrating the aggregate from scratch. This is an example of command form out of command method. We have like setup node here. We are validating business conditions. We are applying events which happened on the aggregate instance. Then when this is done, the next callback method is called with the event which we applied here, and then we are mutating the state of the aggregate. If error happen, we will never reach this point, which means aggregate will be not persisted. The aggregate have all informations about all unpublished yet events which were applied since last rehydration. One of the interesting patterns which we just make some research and experimentation was like having nested aggregates. Very often can happen that your aggregates are growing bigger and bigger, and then you just wonder, okay, if this is not like too big, how to split it, how to extract. Then one way of doing it will be implementing of nested aggregate roots, which will have multiple aggregates inside. To be honest, I am not super happy with this solution. I see like alternative for that. So extracting code to strategies and policies. So extract the logic to some code which can be tested without making instance of the aggregate, which will let you define the business constraint to verify if action can happen or not. Here you have an example of how to pass book builder and book building policy to the aggregate, and then how you can reuse it. This is example book builder, how can it looks like, and example policies or strategy, which you can define and pass to your aggregate. Okay, let's talk about aggregate root again without event sourcing. Aggregate root can be done without doing event sourcing on it, just by having root object. In this case, for example, if you're doing Raceway active record model, and then all of the rules still apply. You should have public contract to access of all of the three of the objects. But the problem with Ruby is that there is no interfaces which making for you the scoping. If you're giving instance of aggregate, you can still call on it destroy. You can call directly relations on it, and you are not able to give it as the instance of specific interface. So I make small research and prepared like a very simple wrapper, which like giving you kind of interfaces in Ruby. This is how they can be used. So you're defining just simple module, which defining the methods. You're telling the specific objects implementing specific interface, and then when you are returning the objects, you can tell, okay, return as this type exactly. This means that even if there are more informations in the active aggregate root, like relations, all active record methods, there will be not unavailable. They are closed by the scope of the interface. So only these methods will be available for you to be executed. Okay, let's talk about what will happen when we would like to change our system. It's never like that we are preparing system and changing nothing in it. There is multiple iterations. We are revealing domain. We are making multiple changes in it. So how we can deal with the changes in our domain, in the classes, and so on. So the best thing for aggregates was just define small mixin, which would let us define aggregate name. This means that if I would like to have refactored this aggregate to the better proper name, I can still leave the name which is used to building the stream name here. Very simple method which let us rename code properly, but without rewriting all of the events in the stream or changing the event store, which should be immutable by design. Next thing is our sagas and process managers. So what is the purpose of it? Like very often aggregate have like wide scope, but still it's not enough to make cooperations between multiple of them. And this will happen that you need to coordinate to work of it. So the name for it is like sagas and process managers. Sagas because are like long-running processes, like verification of purchases and so on. And process managers because they need to cooperate together in order to like achieve the business goal. This is example how we are implementing the sagas in our system. We choose as implementation the same direction like aggregate route. In our case, we implemented saga as kind of aggregate route, which have all of the events internally about what's going on in the saga. So we know how saga reacted for the specific context. This is how we are defining sagas in our configuration. About sagas and process managers, I'm recommending again going back to the previous talk of Robert. It's a really good one and explaining all of the topics which I mentioned right now. Also really good presentation from Udi about sagas and problems with if statements in your business logic. Okay, let's talk about events. This is example event. We have multiple attributes, definitions. Not all of them are just simple values. Some of them like value objects which have more information inside. You can nest them. In order to use dry struct in race event store, we provided our own class, which let us use dry types and also let us define way how we are making versioning of the events. Here we have also small examples how we are using Ruby contracts library to verify that our infrastructure code working in some constraints that will fail quickly in place when you are passing some objects in which is not matching the contract of the method. The nice feature of the Ruby contract is also implementation of the simple pattern matching. This method, new, is a pattern matching implementation. We find out that we need to support 3 different use cases, and implementing without support of the pattern matching was super difficult. Like code was not really telling what's happened, what are the use cases. Splitting this in the 3 different methods make it more clear, more easy to understand. There is some penalties with using contracts because this is another tooling which needs to be executed. That's why Ruby contracts by design are not turned on production, but only in the test and development. But this doesn't mean that pattern matching stops working. This is really nice that we can still use the pattern matching. We have disabled fully Ruby contracts. This is what I mentioned before. So our events have strict schema with defaults, which means that if you will forget about providing one field in the events, this will fail immediately, and then you will know on early stage that you missed something. Okay, events versioning. So very quickly we find out that we're changing the events. We forgot about one field. This needs to be done. So how we can do this? We implemented very simple way how to upcast events from one version to another one because we forgot about something or our domain understanding changed. How the versioning is working. So on the event, you can define version number. By default, you have first version. And then you need to supply the event with the callbacks about how to migrate from one version to another one. Of course, this logic can be extracted to the separate module, which will later on define how to make migrations properly. Important fact about making such migrations is that you should avoid calling here or fetching external state, because if you will start relying in these callbacks on the view models, then you will have huge problem later on, because view models can be deleted, refreshed, or rebuilded, and then you will have no informations when you will rehydrate the aggregate, and then in the event store there will be previous version, and you will start upcasting it. Additional thing which can happen as well is problem with changing the event name. We have old class. If we will, like Ruby raise event store persisting this information in database, then this means that we need to keep this class forever. But by implementing the event mapping, we are able to tell that the old class name now is supported by new class name with different name. Another problem when you're doing lots of development in raise with raise and event sourcing is that by using raise event store, you have lots of configuration like event handlers, command handlers, and you want to still have ability to be just call reload in the raise. If you will not make your own configuration which will handle it properly, then reload will trigger again registration of the event handlers, and then you will have multiple subscriptions on the same events. So that's why you need to take care about configuration of this part. This is example configurations which we have it. Here you can see also information about event handler strategy. I will talk about it soon. This is one example how you can implement configuration of your command handlers and event handlers. It's not the only one. There is no default way of doing it. You have full freedom how you will make it. Another example of implementing it is just simple map. You don't need to have DSL. It's up to you which way you prefer. The approach with this DSL code is that I have on the register method specific contracts which will fail in case when I am providing wrong type of the object to it or class to it. Another examples of the configuration for the view models, sagas, event handlers. Okay, so let's talk about event handlers and denormalizers. Denormalizers are made to take the series all of the events which were published after applying on the aggregates, and then you are listening for them. And in the response of such event, you just building your read models. The nice thing about using event sourcing is that your actual state, which is kept in aggregate root, and way how you are displaying your data in your system are totally decoupled. You can have multiple read stores. You are not forced to use only, let's say, Active Record or Postgres. You can just operate on them. So this means that you can use data storage which is optimized for your specific view or like page. If you want to search for the data which are stored as graphs, you just choosing different storage, not Active Record with Postgres. You're choosing something which is optimized for the view. Or Elasticsearch for searching data. Important things about when you're building like read models, view models, is that again you can make some view model which don't have all of the data which are necessary to display specific page. In this case, you will need to add this field, but how to proceed with that? How to take this information from the past events and update your view? The best and safe way of doing it is just deleting all of the information in the view model. Nothing will happen. This is just, let's say, projection of the actual state of the system, and then rebuilding the whole view model, read model from scratch based on the past events, with additional information which you added in the event handler denormalizer. Okay, event handlers. Denormalizers and event handlers looks like almost the same. The difference is here that this is the way how you will connect one bounded context with another one by just waiting for own events from own bounded context and then calling the public contract of another bounded context. So this is not the way that you always can subscribe to the events of one domain from another bounded context, because then you will have coupling again about current implementation of the event, which can happen, that will be changed many times. Event handlers error strategy. So I find out that I don't know if this is like still like current state, but implementation of the raise event store which I am using, it's not taking care about error handling strategy. What will happen if there is mistake in my error handler? Sorry, not error handler. In the read model or event handler. This means that the code will fail and will not execute all of the other subscriptions of the same for the same event. I will lose information how to rebuild the other events because one in the chain was broken. So now I am able to define strategy how the code should behave in case when error will happen. I will get notification on the error break, but other event handlers will be still executed. View models and queries. So when you have read models, those are in this case very simple active record models, and additional abstractions because of the CQRS is just queries when we are like wrapping them in the same way like repositories. We are just fetching data from the read model, but still these queries can fetch data from many sources, not only Postgres, not only active record. This can be searching in Elasticsearch, taking data from Cassandra and so on. About learning process which happen through this implementation. This is not super simple way to just understand how event sourcing is working. It's super complex process of learning. I watch multiple presentations, I read many blogs about how to make the things. There are a few books about the topic, but every book showing you some piece of information and you need to think about it, how to combine with existing knowledge which you have it. When you're just reading post by post, you're very often losing information, like not losing, but forgetting about what you read before. What was the state of art from the previous article and how to combine these informations together. So in my case, I am using like mind map, which is like taking all of the informations in one place. I can show you maybe closer how such mind map looks like. So like you see, there is many different use cases how to handle different things, and then I am describing all of them, all of the use cases, all of the ways how I can deal with different things, about all of the patterns which I found it, all of them collected in one place. I am using this as reference later on to talk with my team about how to make improvements, if we like it or not, which things can be better, and how to make different, let's say, prototypes of it. Without having huge mind map about how to deal with all of the subjects, I will be totally lost, or I will always rely on the latest blog post or video which I watched. It's not super easy, and I would like to always reflect what were decision, how, or not maybe not what, but how decision was driven, from which data. So if you take a look on it, I have information, not only what is the questions, but also about the data, about example blog posts, about videos, telling about specific things. I am linking them with specific topics which I extracted from it to have one huge knowledge base about event sourcing and CQRS together. This is view of our current infrastructure plumbing code, which we developed in order to use raise event store. It's not like that you need all of them, but those are just our patterns which we discovered when we implemented the application from scratch using raise event store. Because, like I said, I have access to Slack from RKNC about raise event store. We discussed already many of these parts. Some of them are already merged to like event remapping, already merged in the raise event store. That's it. Any questions?
So I have two questions. The first one is, could you estimate how many time or what percentage of time you need to maintain that infrastructure? And what's the percentage, in what percentage it's done? Like you have 50% of what you need and you know that you need to continue, or you are just okay with the stuff you have right now?
Okay, so this looks like that. I didn't start it like with preparing this in advance. When we started implementing, we come up with few open questions, with few issues which we need to solve and address in our infrastructure code. Then we started implementing this part of the code. So how much time this took us? For example, implementation of the of the command form took me around 2-3 days to just make it working with the first version. With the second version, which is like fully active model, which is nested, it's far more advanced. Took me only 1.5 days. This was not done only by me. This was done in the pairing with my friend, and we make it together as like pairing session. I cannot imagine if I would be able only doing this by myself without brainstorming about how to make it, what are the edge cases and so on. Super important thing for that was like having good use cases and describing them in the RSpec in order to start verifying the thesis and check if this is working like we assume.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions?
I was wondering because I was struggling with the same architecture and later on when the system is growing, then a really simple task like adding a really small thing makes you a lot of sort of boilerplate, like you need to add commands handler, event handlers, denormalizers, all the stuff. And I was wondering if you tried to solve this problem by, for instance, write sort of generators like scaffolding stuff for that, or you just won't.
Okay, so domain-driven design topics are not fresh thing. Like when was born, the main reason why I immediately rejected it as interesting idea was that everybody in the Java community talk about how to take the diagrams for the domain-driven design and convert them automatically in the code. This was something unnatural for me to just have huge diagrams and then just generate the code from it, and then how to maintain such code, how to think about like different issues which I will have it with mixing the code which is generated and code which is written by me. So I don't think so that they are a huge problem for me. Like you see, there are a few patterns. There are commands, queries, command handlers, event handlers. Those things are super simple. When we recently hired new guy and we show him how the architecture looks like, I just make same round trip with him to explain how the system is working. We leave him alone to implement the new features. Of course, he asks questions about like missing points and so on. But the feedback from him after using this kind of the, let's say, architecture of these building blocks was like, now everything looks simple. I have well-defined building blocks. I know where to put the things in which parts. So this makes more easy to start with it. And then there is no such thing that, for example, when you have old race application, if you will open different parts, you will see different styles, because developer read about interesting topics, he try it in one place, this approach, in another, this approach. And then when you're jumping on such code, you have huge problem with understanding how this code is working and really understand applied patterns there. When you have standardization about like how the things are implemented, it's much easier to start for the new developers and then follow the same pattern.
I have a simple question. So I think we can safely assume that most people here work for small up to medium-sized startup, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you did it on production, so you have some experience. So basically, how would you convince a product manager from medium-sized startup to invest some of his resources to start building his product using event sourcing. So
Okay,
how he solved it.
maybe I will partially answer it, and then we can give the microphone to Jan. Like from my perspective, this looks like that. Maybe let me move it back. Most important part of it, sorry, is this one, right? They need to see value of it. In my case, which was like a fintech startup, I had like lots of people telling about the idea for the securitizations of the loan, and they want to build the product. I try to understand the domain on the beginning, and then I invite all of them for such meeting. We make multiple iterations on the event storming. The most surprising thing was like when you're seeing like two co-founders which have like strong vision about our business have disagreement in the front of this page about how business will work. I make this exercise on the beginning, they start discussing that they have different understanding, and immediately they demand such meeting every week to have next iteration, because this gives them information. Another side effect of having event storming was that when like new people coming to us, like I don't know, for example, investors or companies which will be our partners because we need to cooperate with providers of the loans, with banks and so on. When they come up to our office and ask me, okay, tell me how this will work. You know what my boss did? He just go to this board and start telling, okay, no problem, we can answer it, and one, explaining all the domain, going by through all of the nodes. He can answer all of them because I forced him to think about it before we started development.
Yeah, and then just one sentence, and the code comes later.
Exactly. This took a while, but like was mentioned, if you make it in advance, this saves you a lot of mistakes later on, because you didn't understand the domain. This is about perceptions. You can talk with them, you will have some perception of what they need, you will build it, and then you need to rebuild it. When you make design phase with simple tools on the beginning, it's much easier. Like I said, still you will need to refactors. This will happen always, but this is making things much easier.
Thank you.
Thank you.